Hello, 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 everyone. We are so excited to start this live today. If you have been seeing some of our advertising for this conversation, question and answer today with Brooklee, maybe you are wondering what is happening when it comes to the NAR lawsuit. What in the world is going on, and how do we move forward today? So that's the whole purpose of our conversation. It is us being able to come together as a real estate community and get our questions answered with facts and not opinions. And so today we have Brooklee here from Housingwire. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brooklee. We are so glad that you are here. And so I was just going to introduce Brooklee just because she's got such an amazing background. And then Carys and I are going to be facilitating some question and answers after she gives us just an overall insight about what is happening with the case, what has transpired up to now, and what she's thinking of will happen in the near future. So I'm going to jump right in. This is Brooklee Han. She is a real estate reporter that focuses on all things real estate brokerage and title. And so in the housing market and title industry, that is all related around those topics. Before joining Housingwire, Brooklee was an international figure skater that represented Australia in the 2014 Winter Olympics. That is absolutely fantastic and fascinating. Brooklee, thank you so much for being here, and I am just going to pass it to you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this. This is a great chance to chat with the industry. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now, and there's a lot of concerns, a lot of questions, a lot of unknown facts. And so I'm hoping that I can answer some questions that you all have today. But obviously, right now, there are four main commission lawsuits in the country. They are all class action or awaiting class action status. The one that we just witnessed the trial of and had the verdict come out last Tuesday was the Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit, which was originally filed in 2019 in Missouri. And the outcome of that trial was that the jury, which consisted of 8 people in this case, found that the National Association of Realtors and the other defendants in the lawsuit, which consisted of Home Services of America, Keller Williams, and initially as well RE/MAX and Anywhere Brands or Anywhere Real Estate. However, both RE/MAX and Anywhere settled the lawsuit. This lawsuit in particular, as well as the Moral lawsuit in Illinois and the No Select lawsuit, which are all dealing with the same issues of cooperative compensation and buyer broker compensation. So those RE/MAX and Anywhere were not present at the trial, but as they settled. So the jury found that the defendants were liable for artificially inflating real estate agent commissions by colluding together and working together to inflate these costs for sellers and home buyers. This is obviously just the jury verdict. The jury also awarded damages at the same time. The damages in the suit were roughly $1.8 billion. And because this is a federal antitrust lawsuit, the damages are automatically trebled or tripled to $5.3 billion. So that's a lot of money for these defendants to try to come up with. And just as a little perspective, RE/MAX, their settlement agreement for the 3 lawsuits, so for Sitzer-Burnett, Moral, and No Select, their settlement amount was $55 million. And Anywhere, their settlement amount for the 3 lawsuits was $83 million. So obviously, those 2 settlement agreements still need to be approved by the judge overseeing the case. And a preliminary hearing for the settlements is set for November 20th. So in about 12 days time, we'll, have a better sense of whether or not these settlement agreements will be approved. It's kind of up in the air right now. So there's, a lot of concern around that. I know both in speaking with both RE/MAX and Anywhere, they're pretty confident that their settlements will be approved. And in addition to the damages amounts, some of the different things in the settlement agreement was like they're no longer requiring their agents to be members of the National Association of Realtors or abide by NAR's Code of Ethics or their MLS guidelines. And then other things such as making sure that their agents are very clear with home buyers and sellers about the commissions, how they work, that they don't have to offer compensation to the buyer's agent, and that their fees or their commissions are negotiable. So that's definitely, obviously, in speaking with a lot of agents or brokers, they would tell me that that's something they do teach their agents. But now it's like an absolute must that this has to be done for at least the RE/MAX and Anywhere agents if the settlement is approved. For the other three defendants in this lawsuit, so Home Services of America, Keller Williams, and the National Association of Realtors, the three of them, as well as the industry in general, are awaiting the injunctive relief from the judge, as well as his final ruling. And injunctive relief is a remedy to a civil suit issue which restrains a party from doing certain acts or requires a party to act in a certain way. And generally, injunctive relief is only available when there is no remedy at law and irreparable harm will result if the relief is not granted. Now, this is where, like, as of right now, yes, there was the verdict and yes, this trial happened, but for the most part, the real estate industry is continuing on business as usual. Like if I decided today that I wanted to, start my home search process or my home buying process, I'd find my buyer's agent. And if nothing crazy happens within like the next 2 weeks and I find a house and close on it, then most likely my buyer's agent's fees will be paid by the seller's agent. As cooperative compensation today works. But with what may happen in the injunctive relief, there's kind of two schools of thought of what the outcome may be. And one is, similar to what we're seeing in the settlement agreements for both Anywhere and RE/MAX, in that there'll be similar policies. Agents won't have to be members of National Association of Realtors, and the judge will ask that NAR does away with the clear cooperation policy so that, in order to list a house on the MLS, you don't necessarily have to be a member of NAR, and you don't have to offer or make any type of offer of cooperative compensation to the buyer's agent. The other kind of end of the spectrum is that the injunctive relief asks the real estate industry or tells the real estate industry that it must stop all cooperative compensation practices, meaning that the home seller pays for their agent and the home buyer pays for their own agent. And that you are absolutely not allowed as an agent to offer cooperative compensation. In speaking with real estate agents, there may possibly be some workarounds for this. If I, as a home seller, like right now, if I want to sell my home and I'm motivated to sell, I can offer to cover closing costs for my home buyer, and I can put that I can have my agent put that in the MLS under, remarks usually, and say that, this home seller is willing to cover X amount of closing costs. And so there are thoughts that maybe if you do have a motivated home seller, that they could include buyer agency fees as part of closing costs, or say that, I'm willing to give you $5,000 towards closing costs and another $5,000 toward your buyer agency fees. But that would be not an antitrust issue. And I've spoken with antitrust law professors and antitrust lawyers about this because it's an agreement between a home seller and the buyer's agent. It's not an agreement between two competing agents, because while in the real estate industry, everyone more or less works together and gets along pretty well, technically speaking, the seller's agent has competing interests with the buyer's agent, because the fiduciary duty of the buyer's agent is to the buyer, and the fiduciary duty of the seller's agent is to the seller. So in that sense, they are competing, and that's kind of the main crux of the issue. Is you have this horizontal conspiracy, or as the judge and the jury have viewed this, and the plaintiffs has viewed it, and that you have two competing parties or sides of the transaction working together to allegedly inflate or keep these commission costs raised. As of right now, we don't know when the injunctive relief will come out. It could come out anytime in the next 30 days. We're all kind of just waiting to see what happens next. In addition, the National Association of Realtors has asked the judge to reduce the damages. That's not many people feel like that's likely to happen, but I mean, if you don't ask, the answer is always no anyway. So they might as well ask. As I said, all three parties have said that they will appeal. And an appeal is not necessarily, it's not a retrial. So the verdict is as stands, and what's being judged or evaluated is how the law was interpreted and applied to this lawsuit. And it's usually a panel of 3 to 5 judges, so it's not a jury of peers or members of the general public. And they will evaluate how the law was applied to the situation. During the course of the trial, there were some different motions that came up, including a motion for a mistrial from Home Services of America due to that Tom Ferry podcast video that was shown with Alan Dalton from a former Home Services or Better Home or Berkshire Hathaway executive. And the counsel for the plaintiffs brought this video in. It was not disclosed in evidence, and the defendants and plaintiffs and attorneys for both parties had decided ahead of time that they were going to tell each other what all their evidence was going in. And so they felt like this video was an ambush and caused significant harm and definitely plagued what the jury was thinking about the industry. So they felt that that was grounds for a mistrial. That motion was dismissed. That could possibly be looked at in an appeal as well. And if the panel of judges overseeing it, agrees with Home Services of America's concerns about this video, then it might the case could be remanded and brought back down to the lower court, and then that would be the opportunity for a retrial. But with the appeal, nothing's really guaranteed. We don't even know if the appeal will be granted. And in addition to appeal a case, you have to post a bond amount. And there would be a bond hearing prior to the appeal process kind of happening. And the money is basically there to ensure that if the appellants don't win, that money is available to pay the damages assigned by the lower court. And it typically is not the full damages amount. No one's really certain of what the amount will be set at. National Association of Realtors has assured members that they have enough money to cover that bond amount. Generally, everyone's expecting, when this amount is set, that the plaintiffs will feel that it is far too little for, the $1.8 billion damages price tag, and the defendants will definitely feel like it is far too much money. But as I said, as of right now, we're all kind of in a holding period, waiting to see what comes next, what is in this injunctive relief, because that will really determine, any significant changes moving forward that the industry has to deal with. And obviously, if it's just simply that, the clear cooperation rule goes away, but you're still allowed to take part in cooperative compensation. That necessarily might not be a big deal. Obviously, you might have home buyers and sellers. This has been in the New York Times. Like, people are aware of this issue. So there might be more questions about, can I negotiate my, how much you're charging me, or, do I have to offer my, the buyer's agent funds and compensation, or, could I offer to cover some of it, or, how will that work? So, definitely the industry needs to be prepared for more questions about that. But if cooperative compensation is allowed to continue, then not a ton changes, but definitely, National Association of Realtors will probably lose some members. Um, Perhaps MLSs across the country will look at different policies. Obviously, some of them, do have a clear cooperation type policy, and so that will have to go away. Um, but if cooperative compensation is, gotten rid of completely and no longer allowed, that would be, very seismic changes happening in the industry. And, obviously there are a lot of concerns from people about how much, if home buyers will be able to afford an extra fee, what that structure will look like, whether it's, a flat fee, like this is how much I charge, or if it'll be like a la carte services, like I charge this much for setting up home tours for you, and this much for, going on those home tours, and this much for negotiating or writing a contract. Or if buyers will simply just start going to sellers agents, and go in unrepresented, which I know is definitely a concern, as it kind of makes an uneven playing field if the seller has representation and the buyer doesn't have that expert on their side. I mean, most home buyers only buy 3 or 4 houses in their lifetime, so this is not a transaction that you do every day. And then also there's concerns about FHA and VA buyers as well. So, a lot of things still up in the air, and a lot of unknowns, unfortunately.
Well, Brooklee, that was such a great overall review of what's happening. And I think that there's so many people right now that are giving their opinions, like we had talked about right when we started this live stream. And if you're watching this live stream and have questions, please put those in the comments, because we really want to answer your questions. And if you're watching the replay, please put your questions in the comments as well, because this is going to be an ongoing conversation. And what you talked about, there's quite a bit to unpack
Mhm.
in all these various different, I almost say that they're little containers of what is going on right now. And one of them is, it seems like with what we've been hearing, that there have already been decisions that have been finalized and made. And from what you've discussed with us today and shared with us today, that is that there's still a very big piece of this puzzle that hasn't been decided on yet, in what is going to shape what our industry is going to look like. So, from your perspective, when it comes to compensation, and you definitely touched on some of those different parts of what that compensation could look like, depending on a couple different ways the injunctive relief can be decided. Do you have any inklings one way or another of how you think things might be decided, based off of how closely you've been following this case, and how you think that this will affect not only the consumer, home buyers in particular, but also those of us that have our businesses inside of real estate? What is that going to look like, especially from your lens, as seeing things from real estate agents as well as the title?
Sure, absolutely. Honestly, I definitely would not bet on either outcome. I am not, I don't know which way the judge will end up leaning. Obviously, we know the Department of Justice is very interested in this issue. We've had the ongoing DOJ investigation into the National Association of Realtors for a couple of years now. And it's I've haven't been covering this industry for, a hugely long amount of time, but I know from talking to others in the industry that it's like every, 10 years or so, the DOJ gets really interested and involved in National Association of Realtors, and this has been ongoing for decades at this point. The DOJ has already gotten involved in the No Select case. And so we're expecting any day now for the DOJ to also get involved here at the Sitzer Burnett case. And that, that could definitely impact what happens with the injunctive relief, as well as the settlement agreements for RE/MAX and Anywhere. With the threat of DOJ involvement, I would, hazard a guess or be prepared as an agent for cooperative compensation to completely go away. Obviously, that is not a great outcome for the industry. But that would be, I mean, I always like to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But that would be the outcome I would be preparing for. Obviously, as I said, there are a lot of concerns on how this impacts home buyers, especially first-time home buyers, or those using FHA or VA loans. Because a VA product is, you don't have to put anything down. It's 100% loan. And it's a very misunderstood product by some agents. And so there's, concerns that obviously VA buyers, need that representation to help them navigate this transaction. And if they don't have funds for a down payment, then they, most likely don't have funds to pay for a buyer's agent that they would need to help them navigate this. Similarly, with an FHA loan, a 3.5% down payment, is a stretch for some buyers that use an FHA loan. So again, they might not have have the funds available to afford the representation that they need to navigate this transaction. In As an agent, I mean, I'm sure everyone has heard it a ton over the past like 18 months. Like right now, everyone that I'm talking to, both, throughout the entire real estate ecosystem, is making sure that you are making your value proposition known. What is your value as an agent? What do you bring to the table? What services can you help your home buyers and home sellers with right now? And so, unfortunately, the industry is expecting to see a bit of a drop off in the number of agents. I mean, we've already been seeing it, of course, because there's a slower housing market right now. And if you aren't doing as much business as you need to be doing in order to, survive here, a lot of people are looking elsewhere for other job opportunities, or, maybe going part-time or whatever as well. So we were already seeing that impact the industry. And then obviously right now, if you are an agent that only works with buyers, this may be a hit for you if cooperative compensation goes away. And, a lot of buyers can't necessarily afford buyer representation. So, looking at really, making that value proposition known, talking with your sphere of influence, really, really fortifying those relationships, fortifying relationships with lenders as well, because if buyer's agency goes away or, greatly diminishes, the lender may be the first point of contact for a lot of home buyers. Um, and I say that, I cover the title industry, but the title industry it's not very well understood by the general public. And so, um, you know, the lending industry is definitely more approachable, I think, from a home buyer perspective. So that's why I think lenders might be the first point of contact. And so, making sure that the lenders understand what you bring to the table as a buyer's agent, and really, developing and putting some investment into those relationships. And then also start working on listing presentations and becoming a stronger listing agent as well. So really diversifying, what you're capable of doing and building those relationships. If you want to stay in this industry, I think that's what I'm hearing from a lot of top agents and brokers. If, that's what we need to be doing right now.
That's so true, because I think that recently there's been such a separation of agents in general because everyone like was doing so well in 2021, even 2022, but then kind of this year things have shifted. There's been a separation where we've seen huge drop out of the industry, and there's been a gap of people that I think that with this lawsuit, it's going to continue to have that separation where people aren't like, they got to sharpen their skills. They got to learn to be better, and they got to learn how to set expectations with clients and show their value. Because if you don't, and you don't know how to do that, and you just think that coasting by is going to make it, it's not going to. So like you said, learning on how to do proper listing presentations, handling objections, knowing how to answer those questions is going to be key. So what advice do you have to agents? Because we've been asked so many questions when it comes to this, and you've answered so many of them. So thank you for providing all of that. But a lot of people, they're just feeling like emotions of stress, like anxiety, like is the buyer's agent going to go away? Are they going to lose a ton of their business? What advice do you have for those people? And even the ones who I've been asked too, of people who are in those brokerages who were involved in the lawsuit, like what do you have advice for agents who just feel like overwhelmed in general right now because of the market, as well as everything going on, where they feel like their business could just be like swiped away from them?
Yeah, no, I've spoken with a lot of agents whose brokerages, were involved in the Burnett suit. And then also we now have the Gibson lawsuit as well, which was filed by the attorney for the plaintiff in the Burnett suit, literally hours after the jury verdict came out last Tuesday. And I mean, it names some of the biggest names in the industry that were not already involved in a lawsuit. So, Compass, Douglas Elliman, EXP, Redfin, Vichert, United Real Estate. So, it's just, as well as the National Association of Realtors again. And it sounds like damages in that suit have been set at roughly $100 billion. So that's a really, really big lawsuit that could have major impact on the industry. So yeah, basically at this point, unless you have a small independent, or, you're an at properties or a Christie's agent, your brokerage might be involved in one of these lawsuits. As I said, right now it's business as usual. And I mean, I know that business as usual in a lot of parts of the country right now is not great, but just because of what the housing market is doing, and also the time of year as well. This is a slower season for the real estate industry. But focusing on what you have right now, what's going on with your market. And as I said, again, fortifying those relationships. This is the time of year where there's lots of gatherings and parties, and it's a chance for you to talk with your sphere of influence or business or transaction partners that you work with in the title and lending and escrow space. So really building out those relationships. Obviously there is that concern of, what could happen in the industry, and what could happen to some of these brokerages. I will definitely, obviously Keller Williams is not a publicly traded company, but based on everyone else's balance sheet, they don't have $1.8 billion in their bank accounts ready to go. So that obviously is very concerning, and I totally understand that. There have been some concerns potentially that while this was at the corporate level for the lawsuits, that some responsibility for coming up with the money for the damages, if the appeal is not successful, will come down to individual agents or brokers or brokerages or franchisees, because of clawback clauses in franchise or agent agreements. And basically the logic of that is the individual agents were the ones responsible for negotiating these, what the jury determined was inflated commissions. So there is that concern that individual agents, brokers, or franchisees will be held responsible for some of the damages amounts. And I've spoken with some brokers who are concerned that their businesses might end up having to shut down because of this. No one is, in speaking with the corporate defendants, it's unclear if this is a strategy they will end up pursuing if the appeal is not successful. But it definitely, in speaking with lawyers, it sounds like it could be a possibility if they chose to go that route. Now, if I, was one of these brokerages and I was going to charge, hold my franchisees accountable for some of the damages amounts, it would be very hard for me to rebuild my business and gain more franchisees in the future if I did this. So it might not be the best business decision, but definitely is a possibility that I think people need to at least have in the back of their minds, and be, not, if it happens, not be surprised by it, unfortunately.
And if it did get passed on and an agent or franchisee was to break away, would that be attached to them as a person? Or if they detach themselves from the brand, they would not be reliable for that?
That I honestly am not sure of. Based on how the settlement agreements for RE/MAX and Anywhere are worded, it sounds like, if you're part, if you've always been part of RE/MAX and Anywhere or one of the Anywhere brands, you're clear, you're fine. But say you were a Keller Williams defendant or a Keller Williams franchise until, mid 2022, and then you joined RE/MAX. Based on the way the settlement agreements are worded, it sounds like that for your time at RE/MAX, you'd be okay. But for your time at Keller Williams, that could be, that's an issue, and you're not part of the settlement agreement for that period of time. So I'm not sure how that necessarily would work with damages, but based on the settlement agreements, I would say that if you change brokerage affiliations or change franchise affiliations, that could potentially be a concern.
Well, this is something that I'm sure Carys can agree with me that we have not heard about nor have had much discussion around the individual responsibility that might fall onto agents and or franchisees. I think that is something that because it really hasn't been discussed, it truly, like you said, Brooklee, hasn't even been on the back of our minds. But I think after this conversation will be on the front of our minds as to not only possibly, being responsible for damages moving forward, but also how we continue to move forward and present ourselves to our clients and go about business. I think that this is just going to open up so many more questions about how do we do this in a way that's going to protect us as individual agents and franchisees as these lawsuits continue to unfold. So, I know that we're starting to come on the back end of our conversation, but you did bring up the second lawsuit that was filed, and it is huge. So from your perspective, with these possible appeals that are going to be coming, with all of these different, really these different parts of this lawsuit floating around, you've already given great advice on how we as individual agents move forward. However, I think that what you just uncovered really just opens up a whole nother huge amount of questions that we have as far as how do we do this in a way that's not going to open us up to being more liable now and in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in addition to concerns about potentially being held responsible for damages, a lot of agents and brokers that I've spoken with, in light of this Gibson lawsuit being filed last Tuesday, are also concerned about copycat lawsuits, whether it's for, a independent brokerage or a specific broker or even a specific agent. There are concerns that obviously it wouldn't be a giant class action lawsuit for an individual agent or even, a small mom and pop boutique brokerage, downtown or whatever. But, these could pop up, and it definitely, agents need to be aware of this. I think, you know, it might feel redundant or like you're just saying things over and over again, but like repeatedly telling clients that your fees are negotiable, being very like overly crystal clear on how you're being compensated. I'd also recommend looking at UDAP as well, uh, because there could be concerns about false advertising or misleading consumers, and so really just being overly clear. Feel like it might feel like you're being ridiculous about it, and you might have clients that are like, yeah, I get it, your fees are negotiable, it's fine. But just making sure that your clients have a very, very good understanding and a very good understanding of what they're getting themselves into by working with you as a listing agent or as a buyer's agent. And again, that's, just being clear on your value proposition, what exactly you're doing. I know agents are busy. I know they don't necessarily have the time for hand holding and walking through clients every single step of the transaction. But if you have a transaction coordinator or someone in your office that can help you kind of deal with some of this, or even prepare a blanket, like a presentation or just some sort of document that you give buyers or sellers that kind of walks them through every single step of the transaction, and you're clear in those steps of what you as their agent will be doing, and how much time it may take for you to complete those tasks and everything involved. Just, yeah, as I said, it might feel very redundant and kind of ridiculous, but I think agents just have to be super, super clear on everything they're doing for their clients, for whether they're the buyers or the sellers, and how those what they're doing is working towards the end goal of either selling the property or helping their buyer find a new home.
Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, not all agents are created equal. I think that's just flat out. So I think when it comes to all of this, even like we said, with the market, with the lawsuit, and now even going into the new year and everything, with things just changing, the rates, this, that, and everything else, at the end of the day, it's like, what is your value as a real estate professional to your clients and to everyone anyway, to people who want to be your clients, to people in general? Like, what is your value? What do you provide? What is the level of the service? So that comes down to setting those expectations, setting those standards, because the way that one person runs their real estate business is completely different to how somebody else does it. So when it comes to your skills, it is all taking that to the next level and just making sure that you are, when you're the best that you can be in all avenues of your business, then you should not be fretting about something like this, because you know the value that you provide to people. So for anyone watching this, it's like, just take your time to sharpen your skills, take everything to the next level, learn as much as you can, be competent in what you're talking about. Like, watch this all over again. Make sure you learn what's going on in the market, in the industry, because the more that you can communicate that in a very strong way to your clients, then your value is priceless, because you are that professional and you hold yourself to that level that other people won't doubt your value, because you're at that level, and competence equals that confidence. So I think that when it comes down to it, it's just like stack on as much value and sharpen your skills as much as possible.
Absolutely. That is really great advice. And top agents who, have really honed those skills, I think should feel, obviously some concern, because I think everyone's feeling concern right now. But they should, feel pretty confident that they'll be able to adapt and still thrive in whatever new environment we're heading into. And a lot of these pieces of advice and information are the same that, I was hearing from a lot of real estate educators a year ago when the market was really slowing down. And so it's really just kind of even more, working towards, honing those skills, improving your education, finding areas of the transaction of the industry that you don't understand, and making sure that you are the number one best resource for your clients and for anyone in your life who might have questions about real estate. Be able to be prepared to answer those questions.
That's all such great information, both of you. I know that there are people that are watching this stream or they're going to watch the recording of this and have those questions in their mind of how do I move forward from here, right? Like, how are we going to move forward in a positive way? And we're seeing so many positive comments around of in this thread right now of what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And something that John actually commented on is about the listings and about who is liable if franchisees or individual agents possibly could be paying some of these damages. And so this was his comment, that it could possibly be very tough for these brokerages to hold agents liable because the listing agreement is between the brokerage and the seller. So I thought that was a very interesting comment. Do you have any thoughts on that, Brooklee?
Yeah, that is, in talking with some agents and antitrust lawyers, that's definitely the one kind of glimmer of hope that a lot of these agents will hopefully have, and that they will not be able to be held responsible for this. But that still wouldn't prevent, even if it doesn't amount to anything other than a lot of headache and stress and concern, an individual agent could potentially still be sued for, overcharging or, false advertising, or not being, because they weren't clear on how they were being compensated. So with the damages, yes, that's definitely, a lot of people feel like that's a way that agents will be insulated from this, but it won't necessarily protect them from copycat lawsuits or other lawsuits moving forward.
Well, we really appreciate the factual information you have given us today. I think that this has just started us of wanting to have you come back often to keep us updated and just keeping us knowledgeable about not only what is going on, but the actions that we can take moving forward as strong professionals in this industry, like both you and Carys talked about, really increasing the value that we have as real estate professionals, regardless of what area that we're in, creating those relationships. And if you have those relationships with other areas in our industry, making them even stronger, because like you said, Brooklee, if the buyer is going to be going straight to their lenders, making sure that those relationships that we kind of forget about being important are actually on the forefront of our minds, and making sure that is part of our daily activities, is making sure that those relationships are strong and that they're purposeful moving forward. So as we begin to wrap up, are there any last thoughts from either you, Carys, or Brooklee, that you want to end this with, of just steps that we could use moving forward?
For me, really, my biggest piece of advice is, as I said, right now, everything is business as usual. But obviously, you agents need to be thinking about what their next steps are if, cooperative compensation does potentially go away. And, really, as I said, we're kind of in this holding period waiting for the injunctive relief to come through. So making sure you're keeping up with your news on what's happening in the industry, which I think a lot of people are doing more so now than ever with everything going on. But, just having different plans in place for whatever may transpire once we have that injunctive relief.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brooklee, for all the information that you provide. Everyone seemed to have loved everything and
Yes.
hearing up-to-date news, because nowadays, between social media and regular media, like there's just everything on people's opinions and not on facts about what's actually going on. Even realtors like arguing on social media about what this means. And so it's nice to hear some facts about someone who really knows like what's actually going on without that opinionated input in there. So we're really appreciative for that and for you sharing it with all of our peoples. And we'll definitely have you on here soon, because everyone seemed to love all your information and the way that you phrased everything as well, just to make sure that people actually understand what's going on. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, everyone.
All right, you guys. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Again, like Carys said, thank you, Brooklee, for sharing such great information. And we will see everybody next time. All right, you guys, have a great week.
See you later.